My work has been motivated by the question, do virtues or does virtuousness make a difference? Now, the reason that's interesting to me is that virtue, which in the original Latin and Greek means essentially the best of the human condition, the highest aspirations we hold for ourselves is a virtuous state. When we are at our very best, we're in a virtuous condition. But the question is, if people are virtuous in a work setting where that's not the point of an organization, the organization generally exists to make money, to preserve jobs, to serve customers, does virtuousness matter at all? Because if I'm kind to you only to get a return, only to get a payback, it ceases by definition to be kindness. It's now manipulation. I'll only be kind if I can get what I want. Well, that's not kindness. So we don't need a payback, but the question is there one anyway? If we could foster or enable or help organizations implement virtuous practices, would it matter? So I'm going to tell you just about two very quick studies. One is with financial service organizations. Now, the reason that's important is because financial service organizations don't care anything at all about virtuousness. Show me the money, right? That's the least virtuous place on the planet, Wall Street. At least it's not non-virtuous, it's irrelevant. Excuse me. So we picked those organizations, even in the most difficult industry we can imagine. Does virtuous have any impact at all? And then you'd expect it in healthcare. So we kind of had two different sets of organizations. One when you would expect compassionate and care and so support would matter, and one would you'd expect it would not matter. That's the study. Okay. Here are the dimensions of virtuousness that were measured. This is an instrument that was refined from 100 and some items down to about 30 items, and it's available if you'd like it. I'm happy to send you this instrument you can use in your own research. But after lots and lots of different kinds of psychometrics, here are the dimensions that ended up holding together pretty well psychometrically, and in fact, you can see the alpha is above 9 for each of these scales, so it's very highly reliable. And it's been validated in all these different industries, and I won't talk about that. Here is very briefly and I'll go short so we have some time for questions. Here's the results of our study in financial service organizations. What we discovered is if we can help organizations implement virtuous practices. Now, what does that mean? Higher scores in compassion, higher scores in forgiveness, higher scores in support of one another and so on, caring, even in an environment where that's not valued. This slide simply summarizes that we measured improvement scores and then look a year and a half later at outcome scores. And in this case, it's simply profitability. Do organizations make more money when they are more virtuous? The answer is yes, absolutely. That R square stands for the amount of variance accounted for. I have in my briefcase an article I'm reading for a journal. The R square in that study is 0.1. 10% of the variance can be accounted for, and they're pretty proud of the fact that I can account for 10% of the variance. We can account for almost half the variance in profitability if I just know the extent to which virtuous practices are being implemented in these organizations. It's almost so strong as to be unbelievable. But the point is, virtuousness matters a lot. And then it's not only profitability, and by the way, the profitability, some people say, well, we measure it in terms of simply cash flow. Other people say we measure it in terms of the amount of revenue per person, and so on. So we said, fine, we'll measure it in any way you want. We'll measure it in 6 different ways, and it still holds. And it's not only profitability, but you see in these other areas as well, much more soft areas, turnover and employee engagement and retention of customers and so on. Virtuousness pays. Healthcare, you'd expect it. That is, this study was done where we simply took 30 organizations, healthcare organizations, they were willing to take this seriously, and some did better than others. So when they improve on virtuousness scores, 2 years later, what happens to the dimensions they care about? That is, we asked them to identify the effectiveness dimensions that were important to them. And bingo, patient care, quality goes up. Physician-nurse relationships, which are often not very great, are improved. I mean, double-digit improvement in all kinds of areas in each of these, on each of these dimensions. Now, the question is, why is that? And this is the last slide I'll show you. This is the theory. There are, in fact, amplifying effects. That is, if I am exposed to virtuousness, I have a tendency to respond in kind. I'm inspired, I'm elevated. There is, in fact, an amplifying effect associated with virtuousness. There's also a buffering effect when people, and you've heard some of these presentations before. Barbara Fredrickson's wonderful work sort of talks about this. It creates more resilience, as Ned mentions. In fact, people become stronger in the presence of virtuousness. So it's easier to withstand the difficulties we face. And in addition to that, there's something called a heliotropic effect, which essentially is all living systems, everything alive, from single-cell organisms to complex human systems, everything alive has a tendency toward the light and away from dark, or toward that which is life-giving, away from that which is life-depleting. Makes sense, doesn't it? Evolutionary theory would suggest that which enhances or engenders life is attractive. That which endangers or depletes life is, I resist that or flee from that. That means all living systems have a tendency to flourish in the presence of positive energy and diminish in the presence of negative energy. And that's one of the theories of why this works, and there's more to it than that. Now, I wanted to leave time. We only have 5 or so minutes left before we have to quit, but that's this set of studies, and there are more, but this set of studies essentially says at the very bottom line, virtuousness, positive practices, positive energy pays off. In fact, even in terms of profitability, productivity, customer satisfaction, and so on.